Joining us now to debate the Trump economy and the Biden economy and future plans. Stephen Moore is a senior economic advisor to the Trump 2024 presidential campaign, the co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Also, former Council of Economic Advisors Chairman Jason Furman. He's an economics professor at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. And, wow, we're going to break some new ground here, Steve. If Trump were to regain the presidency, former President Trump, what are some of the planks of his plan? I'm seeing something about even further cuts for corporate taxes. Is that really being considered?
Hey, Joe, good to be with you, and good to be with Jason as well. Look, I think there's no question the top priority will be to make sure that those tax cuts that Art Laffer and I and Larry Kudlow and others helped put together for Trump. And, you know, we did it. There was a lot of controversy about whether it would work. And, you know, clearly it did. We had a boom in investment. By the way, I was just looking at these numbers, Joe. Corporate tax revenues have almost doubled since we cut the tax rate. I think there's a Laffer curve that says that kind of thing will happen. But then, you know, it's not just taxes. I think there's no question we're going to have a very pro-American energy policy. We're going to head back to being energy independent again. We're going to drill for oil. We're going to use our clean coal. We're going to use our natural gas to lessen the impact that countries like Iran and Russia and China have over the world economy. And then finally, you know, we want to get Americans back to work. We want policies that could actually help people get back into jobs, and not just jobs, but jobs that pay well. You know, when you've got a problem, Joe, a lot of families today, middle-class families, have a hard time being able to afford to go to McDonald's, for goodness sakes. I mean, this has been an agenda, a four-year agenda that has really crushed middle-class families.
Jason, there are certain things that you probably wouldn't disagree with, I guess, there. But there are some things you'd probably like to push back on that Stephen just said. What would be different if the president wins re-election?
Yeah, I mean, Steve left out the biggest tax increase that Donald Trump is proposing. In fact, it's the only very explicitly worked out part of his platform that I'm aware of, which is a 10% tax on all imports and a 60% tax on everything coming from China. I was not a fan of the latest round of tariffs that President Biden proposed. But let's put some perspective on them. They were on $18 billion of imports. We import $4 trillion worth of stuff. So you're talking about 200 times the scope of what the recent Biden tariffs were. For a typical family, you're talking an extra $1,700 of costs. And then you add that to the other inflationary parts of the agenda. You have advisors to President Trump saying that he would fire Jay Powell within the first 100 days. That would set up a massive amount of uncertainty, court cases, and the like. Let's say he doesn't fire him in the first 100 days, but he just tweets at him saying that he's worse enemy than President Xi, which is what he did the last time he was president. One of the things that President Biden has done that I really respect has been to respect and strengthen the independence of the Fed, even while it was raising rates really rapidly. What happens if that comes to an end? So I think there's a lot of peril here. A lot of it can be expressed, especially in terms of inflation and tax increases on middle-class families.
Jason, do you I think I asked you about the capital gains increase, and you really weren't that anti-capital gains that President Biden was talking about. And what about the taxing unrealized gains? Both of those, to many people, those are both sort of anathema to any normal economic thinking. Do you go along with both of those ideas?
I mean, they're both way better than any of the tariffs that we've just been talking about, Joe. But look, there's a lot of economic logic to taxing unrealized gains. Right now, one of the problems with the capital gains system is that it locks in your gains. It dissuades you from selling because you want to hold until later when you get a lower rate. That is a proposal that applies to a relatively small slice of people. We could argue what the right rate of taxing capital income is, and I'm open to a variety of things. In fact, I'd like to reform the tax code so we had permanent expensing and got rid of the interest deduction, more incentives for business investment going forward. But, we're going to need to raise revenue somehow.
What about the tariff issue, Steve?
Well, look, on the tariffs, I worked with Trump in his first administration. We talked a lot about tariffs. It's interesting because, when I've talked to Trump about this over the years, he's always said, Steve, I use tariffs as a weapon. And he does. And he's used it, in my opinion, and by the way, I'm a free trade guy like Jason is. I don't like tariffs, but, it is an absolute truth that Trump used the threat of tariffs highly effectively in his first term. It was the threat of tariffs that got the European nations to pay their NATO dues. It was the threat of tariffs on Mexico that got Mexico to help secure the border. It was standing toe-to-toe with President Xi and saying, look, I'm going to slap you with a 40% tariff unless you start playing by the rules and stop stealing our intellectual property. And you know what? All of those things worked. And it's really interesting, Joe, because if you look at the tariffs that were implied by Trump versus the tariffs that have applied to Biden, Biden actually has higher tariffs than Trump does. So come on, that isn't kind of a fair thing. Now, one other point. This capital gains issue that you brought up is incredibly important to investors. Most of the people watching the show watch it because you're investing your money or investing other people's money. This would be an economic cyanide pill to the U.S. economy. He's talking about, and by the way, I'll give Biden credit. He's telling people these crazy things that he wants to do, like tax unrealized capital gains, which has never been done before in the history of this country. People would literally have to sell the farm to pay the taxes. And the capital gains tax would go up in the United States to roughly the highest in the world, higher than China, higher than Russia, higher than Europe. Like, how in the world is the United States going to compete with those high rates?